Saludos a todos. I think that as a Latino atheist and a straight white male, I'm obviously qualified to talk in behalf of this American Christian who happens to be a black trans man. So let's do it. Guys, this segment is called Trans Man Finds His Faith in Activism. This was published by usatoday.com. Links in the description. Please check it out. And yeah, it's going to talk about this trans person who has been attacked by a Christian institution. We will be talking about that later on. But let me talk about my personal opinion in this segment. Because, I always talk about how religion harms society. That's kind of my thing. And here we have a wonderful example about this. People being discriminated against just because of who they are. And apparently this seems to go against silly and outdated religious ideas. So people get their future destroyed when religious institutions discriminate against them and they don't let them keep studying or pursuing a career on their own in the future. That's why I find it so ironic that religious schools are fighting for their right to discriminate because they believe that discriminating people is part of their religious beliefs, which is disgusting for me. I mean, I always say, whenever I come here, I say, USA, you scare me. Because whenever I learn something new about the USA, I'm like, what the heck? How is that possible? Learning about this, I learned that religious institutions get legal exemptions against anti-discrimination laws just because they are religions, just because discriminating is part of their thing. And that, I mean, that scares me. That's weird. That's awful. I don't know, Tim. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty interesting article about a black trans man who's been applying to Christian educational institutions and battling them on whether or not he should be allowed in or not. And so something only briefly mentioned in the article, which I think is pretty central to the issue, is that LGBTQ people are not a protected class in America and definitely should be, in my opinion, in the opinion of many others. For example, you cannot tell a couple you won't bake a wedding cake for them because they're black. You would face legal repercussions, and the Supreme Court would have to decide against you because protection for racial minorities is encoded in law. You can't have a business that doesn't feature ADA compliance in the structure, such as wheelchair ramps or handicap parking, because physically disabled people are a protected class. This is the distinction that the religious hide behind when they want to discriminate against LGBTQ people. Legally and unfortunately, they can until a law is passed adding LGBTQ people to the list of protected classes in the US against which you can't discriminate. Even a religious institution can't say they don't want to admit a person based on their age, sex, or ethnicity. Their right to discriminate doesn't go that far. They're only legally allowed to discriminate against homosexuals and transsexual people, and that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say that my heart broke for Zane when I read this article. He definitely deserves better than he received. Now, I am glad he managed to get out of the restrictive version of Pentecostalism, which they were raised. I was raised in a particularly restrictive sect of Pentecostalism myself. Even without the whole bigotry casting its ugly fingers on every aspect of this story, it is repulsive. It highlights a real problem where for over $4 billion a year goes to religious institutions. Now, as you mentioned, Title IX does bar certain discriminations, but not for these. I know the Biden administration is attempting to rectify that, but they're facing an uphill battle in the court, and right now the court's gone ape shit crazy the wrong direction. Now, having said that, to read about these people and how they've been treated, if people want to endorse and spew hateful ideologies, they can do that, unfortunately, but they should be able to do it with their own damn money, not ours. Now, unfortunately, though, in a pattern that we see time and again with victims of abuse, Zane has clung to his abuser God even more. Their religion ingrains you with guilt, fear, and self-loathing. So why not accept the abuse and just keep coming back for more? The truth is, it's better to rip the bandage off, and you don't need to squint at the Bible and from 100 feet away and pat your head and rub your belly. It's better just to put away childish things, the false god, and be free. Now, I do hope he finds his way out of religion entirely. And this is one of my major concerns with more liberal interpretations of Christianity. I feel oftentimes it just gives a layer of legitimacy to a really horrible thing because, there's a lot of people that don't want to discriminate, but they just kind of go with the flow, and this type of thing is kind of like, yeah, well, what can we do about it? God will take care of it in the end. And well, yeah, not at all.
Yeah, I really left this article like with mixed thoughts and emotions. On one hand, any school organization in the United States that is allowed to practice bigotry on the grounds of religion and still get federal funding should not get federal funding. I
Yeah.
think that should be like point blank period. Like if you, regardless of
shouldn't even
what,
be a contested.
it
It shouldn't even be
shouldn't.
controversial.
It shouldn't.
Shouldn't be controversial.
Right, like you're not allowing students to come into your particular facility because they're not this, right? And for that, like, okay, cool. Like it should be that the court would say, like, all right, cool, bigot, go bigot until you can't bigot no more. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
we ain't gonna give you money so that you can bigot your bigotness. You dig? Bigot. So that's my problem with that. So and in actuality, I see that is no difference in principle when Jerry Falwell's Victory University was threatening to actually have their federal funding pulled because they would not allow Black students to actually be accepted into their schools in the 1970s. They were told specifically, like, listen, you will not get federal aid funding if you will not allow students who happen to be not white into your school. Now, I personally am like wrestling with why in the flying flibbity flurb would you want to go to a school where administration
Sure.
teaches things to hate you in the first place? That makes no
Right.
sense to me. It doesn't.
Well, that's what a lot of people were saying about the Colorado baker with the gay couple.
Yeah.
Why would you want a cake made by him anyway? Which is it seems like a legitimate point, but at the same time, it kind of distracts from the idea that people shouldn't be allowed to do this. And you think about every time the U.S. government has had to step in and say, hey, you legally can't discriminate against these people anymore. It's now become the norm. Like you can't imagine a school now saying Black people can't enter because of our religious beliefs, right? You can't imagine a church saying we won't marry an interracial couple, right? You can't imagine that happening anymore because it got encoded into law.
Right.
And this is one of the last kind of bastions they have of their hate and their bigotry that they hold on to is the LGBTQ people. It's gay people now more than ever. It's becoming trans people. Is that they're allowed to discriminate, and they feel like they should be allowed to discriminate against these people because it's not encoded into law. And I mean, that's our government has to force it. Our government has to step in from time to time and say, no, you can't.
And I mean, but that's the issue that we're seeing specifically here, that the government is actually saying no, they can, because religion says that they can. Their God, their belief, etc., is saying that you are an abomination, trans person. You are an abomination, queer person. Therefore, they are allowed to discriminate against you because we cannot infringe on their particular rights when it comes to their religious beliefs. Which another crazy thing about it is that we are having a problem specifically in the United States where we are constantly blurring the lines between church and state, between religion and government specifically. And therefore, like this is when like a lot of these particular arguments are becoming moot. So if you're going to tell a person, well, we're going to go ahead and give this to you, even though you're a religious organization, and we really shouldn't, because, Congress shall make no law against religion, and we are not going to be able to step, the whole establishment clause thing, right? But then at the same time, allow them to continuously operate give them federal money to actually still be able to exclude people based on their sexual preference and or their gender identification. And it's insane to me. But but as an aside, it's really insane that LGBTQI people would still want to attend religious schools when historically religion has had such animus towards
Right.
them.
Yeah.
But at the
You
same
know,
time,
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead. Go
Joe.
ahead. Go. Yes, let's debate. Let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
to me, the first thing that comes up is the fact that kind of alluded what I talked about alluded to earlier is the fact that it's they're taught. We've
Mhm.
all of us, most of us come from religious background. We're hardwired into that guilt. That guilt is part of it. So just because they don't necessarily agree with me or think that I'm acceptable, well, for a God that thinks I deserve to burn in hell anyway, uh, what do I deserve? So maybe I just
Mhm.
deserve to be treated like a piece of shit. And
Mhm.
I think that that's unfortunately a reality in all of these situations. It's like, okay, there I disagree with what they say, but at the end of the day, I'm a bad person anyway. So, just for 1,000 other reasons, maybe not the one that they think, but I deserve it anyway. So God's got it all figured out. And,
uh,
and unfortunately, that doesn't fix anything. That just allows this abuse. And to me, one of the simplest ways to resolve this is let's go ahead and get federal funding out of all religious schools, period. Let's just not put a single dime. You want to have your religious school, you want to have something religious, have at it. Knock yourself out. You pay for it. Hey,
I
I'd love to
wish.
see. I'd love to see federal money go into the ACA, and we could go in there and see some nice things that the funds paid for. But you know what? No, that's for religious organizations. We know that won't happen. They'd be lining up in droves protesting that. But
Sure, they
we should
would.
just look the other way because, well, we're religious.
yeah, I wanted to say that. Yeah, I agree that religious institutions shouldn't get money from the state. Well, down here they are all private, so they never get, unless there is some strange way where they can, but they are forced to not to discriminate in here. Amazing, my third world country is better than the USA even in that. Okay, but I wanted to talk about the first thing that you mentioned, what religions tell to people. How can trans people still be religious if the religion hates them? And there is something that I think it was Tim who said earlier, that this is not very clear, so it can be interpreted in different ways.
Mhm.
And I personally have met LGBTQ plus priests who have their own LGBTQ plus churches. For me, they are just cherry picking some parts of the Bible, and it's very dishonest in a way. But at the same time, I see that they try to see Jesus as this figure of love, and they try to ignore everything else from the Bible. They say things like, no, 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 Jesus said love, and everything else was added by people who didn't agree with Jesus back at the time.
Mhm.
Once again, I consider that dishonest, but I see what they are trying to do. They are trying to give people a space where they can have their own faith, and they can keep deceiving themselves into believing that God loved them. It's only that all the other institutions that believe in the same God, for some reason, hate them. And I think that is why this guy in here, he said that being discriminated by religion made him more religious, which is so weird, so strange. Like, yeah, this giant organization believes that should suffer and I should be discriminated, but that just makes me believe that the person responsible for the existence of that organization loves me. So weird. I don't know, Cynthia. I think you. Mhm.
Oh my gosh. I hate to make this about race, but I'm about to make it about race. So, in the sense of what you just mentioned, Teo, about Zane specifically saying that because he and his community is being discriminated against, that has caused him to fall back on his faith even more. And I know that I'm paraphrasing, but this is the same rhetoric that was said about the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, that people were, marching, singing, we shall overcome, and, keep your eyes on the prize, and God's gonna work it out, and whatever else that they came up with on a Tuesday night during a meeting, because God eventually is going to see us through if we just, you know, that faith without works is dead thing, and now faith is the substance of thing, hope for a thing, and all that other problematic Bible talk. But in a way, I'm looking at it is that you are still so wrapped up in your indoctrination that you are really allowing this whole talking point to be an abusive point to you. Yes. Why do I say that? Because you really feel that God is allowing this persecution to make you a stronger Christian, and eventually he gonna see you through, maybe, kind of, sort of, on a high holy day, if a pizza happens to be flown up in the air. Yes, I just made that up, but still, you get what I'm saying. But I did want to mention this one thing, and then I'm going to ask, Infidel, if you can kind of chime in on it and some other things that you may want to add. In the article, I was a bit confused. I was a bit confused about this whole thing, but one of the things that the article said, that a U.S. district court in Oregon dismissed Silva's case in January. The judge appointed President Bill Clinton wrote that the exception appeared to be related to the government's objective of accommodating religious exercise, and that Congress did not appear to have discriminatory intent when it approved the language. So if the exemption literally used to keep a person out based on their gender identity and or their sexual orientation, how would that not appear to have a discriminatory intent when you are literally discriminating? What are you confused, Infidel? Because I know I am. What you think about that?
Well, I think first and foremost is that he's probably talking about the intent of Congress, and their intent may have not been discrimination. But if I take a hammer and hit you upside the head with it, the fact that the hammer wasn't designed to hit people upside the head really isn't an excuse for the behavior, and I think that that's what's been lost sight of. Now, as you touched on and I touched on as well, is that, and this is back to my concern about liberal theological philosophies, because they give an excuse, they give a rationale. And as you said, I'm working with the system right now, and if I hang out long enough and I met the right trajectory and that pizza does pop out, I'm there, I'm on it. Yes. But we all know there's no pizza in the sky, and the reality is that when I read that story, and I don't even know where to start, hearing him talk about the person on the phone telling him, yes, sweetie, come on in and go. Look, I'm from the South, and I know a lot of things get used, baby and these things are not necessarily gender specific. I don't know if I've ever heard sweetie used in a way that didn't at least imply a gender. But what the guy went through is just absolutely horrendous. Talking about getting that call saying he wasn't allowed, even though he was honest, and we appreciate your honesty, but no, still stay away from us. And getting out of that Uber and sitting down there in the corner and crying, that's just disgusting on so many levels. I can only hope that those people in the middle of the road quit rationalizing these type of things and realize that I'm part of this problem. Whether I'm the one who's doing it, I may not be the person in the admissions office, but my tacit approval of this type of behavior in Christianity in general is saying it's okay to behave this way. It's okay to treat people as second class, or forget second class. At this point, I've been watching some of these preachers online, and it's to the point where they're saying, hey, you should go out and stone gay people. Trans people, my kid I'd get rid of them, kill them myself. I'm happy when they die. And when you hear these types of behaviors, all these people in the middle of the road, I just feel like, hey, come on, do it or get off the pot. If you want to go join them, let's be honest and join them. But if you want to be honest about the situation, let's go ahead and back up and realize that maybe you're on the wrong bus in the first place.
Yeah, I would hope that like that they would think that, and I don't know. Well, I guess we'll just see as time goes on. If any of the actors that happen to be in the decision making spaces, like the court, like Congress, etc., that they may just see that, hey, maybe you're on the wrong side of of history on this.
No doubt.
And I don't necessarily think that they may actually think that now, but who knows, maybe they'll have a Damascus Road moment. Maybe. But I would say to Zane and to other LGBTQIA activists who happen to really be pushing for inclusivity when it comes to going to Christian schools so that they can be ordained and received accolades in that particular aspect. Good luck. And a bit of advice, uh, especially to you, Zane. I know that you think that you are running on faith, but you don't need faith. You need a whole team of Thurgood Marshals. And with that being said, if you, dear viewer, want to find out more about other teams of Thurgood Marshals or anything like that, click here.